We are ready to start streaming. We are going live. 1, 2, 3, go. Welcome back to the Comics Cube, everyone. This is an impromptu live stream where we are joined by my friends Paul Cornish and Rich Handley, and we're talking about Doctor Who. This is an impromptu live stream because this is an important day for Doctor Who fans. What's up, guys?
Hey there.
Hello. This is a very important day because Doctor Who is being broadcast in a few hours here in the UK, and Doctor Who will be regenerating again into a different actor.
This is a very important sentence because I understood none of that. Okay. So for everyone's context, I do not watch Doctor Who. I have not seen Doctor Who. And we are here so that I could be educated about Doctor Who by two experts of Doctor Who.
Well, one expert and me in any case.
So one of you tell me, what is Doctor Who all about?
Well, tell you what about first, Duy, what do you think it's about based on the fragments you know?
That's a great start. Yeah.
That's a great question, Paul. I think so. These are the fragments that I'm picking up on. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, where there is a time-traveling phone booth. Dan Slott and Mike Allred's Silver Surfer run, where the Silver Surfer goes around space with a woman named Dawn. So I think Doctor Who is about an unnamed doctor who goes on adventures with various people, and throughout time and space, perhaps somehow changing their appearance periodically due to budget constraints and actors leaving. I have no idea why it's gone on for so long. When people say you should watch Doctor Who, I don't know where they mean for me to start. I know Alan Moore has written a few Doctor Who comics. I know there have been Doctor Who comics. I know there are, 14 different actors that have played the Doctor. Somehow you call him the Doctor and not actually Doctor Who. I don't know why.
Well, first off, Duy, that was 100% accurate, which is pretty good for someone who knows nothing about it. There was nothing incorrect. That was a very good capsule of the TV show.
You've summed it up. That's it. That's the live stream.
Yeah, we're done. Bye, folks.
But I don't know what any of that means.
But that's what it is. It's basically this mysterious immortal alien in a time travel device that's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, and they travel through time and space because they're nosy and curious, and they want to help people as well. And occasionally they pick up companions to travel with them, and their time machine is stuck in the form of a 1960s British police box, which isn't quite a phone booth. Back in like the first half of the 20th century, policemen who were on the beat needed to have somewhere to keep warm and to contact other policemen before the invention of radios. So there were these little blue boxes that they could just go into to keep warm and to phone other police officers.
And they were not bigger on the inside, so it was cramped.
Yes. So that's what the TARDIS, which stands for Time and Relative Dimension in Space, is trapped in the form of. And which is, wonderful, because there are still, little tangent here, there are still police boxes dotted around Britain. There's one in Sheffield that's green. I used to live in Sheffield. I used to get very excited whenever I saw it. And they have recurring bad guys, primarily the Daleks, who are these race of like space Nazis, and they look like robots, but inside them is a little genetic mutant
They
driving
also look like pepper
around.
shakers.
Yeah.
See, that absolutely feels like something that was like, we have a very low budget.
Well, saying Doctor Who had a low budget is probably an insult to low budget things. The original Doctor Who, if it even had a budget, what made the original Doctor Who so extraordinary was how incredibly entertaining it was when its budget consisted of 3 pennies and a pipe cleaner. Like, that's what it's amazing, is that they created these really interesting aliens and these really interesting sets where you could see the walls shake and the strings on the puppets and the Daleks walk into walls because the operator couldn't see beyond a little piece like that. So it's amazing how good it is, given that budget really was quite small. And in fact, I think that as the show went on and the budget got larger and the audience got larger, I think the smartest thing they did was to purposely keep the look. They would make the effects better, but if you watch a show now, there's a character named Davros who created the Daleks, and he looks like he did when he was introduced decades ago, which is just marvelous because it feels like it's the same universe. It's not like Star Trek where 60s technology and the technology you see on Discovery, it's kind of hard to imagine it's the same universe sometimes. With Doctor Who, that budget, even though the budget got bigger, that low budget look was purposely retained. It makes for a very fun experience.
Why does that work? Like, why does that work? Because for example, right? Like, if you watch something like, let's go with a George Reeves Superman, just to illustrate my point, right? If you go with a George Reeves Superman, and then today, if you were to do something Superman, you cannot make it look like it stepped out of the George Reeves series, right? So why does it work for Doctor Who?
I would argue you could, because one of the things that people always get excited about is retro. When they go, oh, I wish they would do that. For example, the keep it in your and my wheelhouse. The opening, the montage in the film Watchmen is arguably the movie's best scene because it's done in a retro style. On the recent Superman show, everybody got excited at seeing that old Superman outfit in a flashback. A lot of people say maybe the best way to handle James Bond going forward is to follow Ian Fleming's template and actually have it set in the era that James Bond is supposed to be set, and so forth. I think that there's an audience for people to embrace this whole concept of remaining retro in approach. I think that what the example you suggested, if done right, could be brilliant.
I think it is that, definitely, but I think it's more than that as well, because I think the budget constraints forced them back in the day to use their imaginations. And, so the Dalek, I mean, it just looks amazing, and it looks like nothing else that exists, So why wouldn't you want to use this design? Why would you want to turn this into just another killer robot or whatever? Because it's unique, it's amazing. What you're saying about Davros, it was a guy in makeup, but there's something quite terrifying about that as well, about this deformed bloke in a half a Dalek chair, wheeling around the place.
And they made Davros look slightly more realistic, but he's still a guy with a rubbery arm that does this when he turns wrong and so forth. Like it's fun. And that's the thing. I think the reason, Duy, that it works is because those who watch the old stuff, it works for both those who did and those who didn't. Those who watch the old stuff can look at this and chuckle that it hasn't been updated. And those who didn't can say, I've never seen a modern day show that looks like this. And so it's original. For those who didn't watch the old stuff, they go, wow, that's surprisingly realistic non-realism. That's unusual, in a show where everything is CGI. There's a species in Doctor Who called the Slitheen, which are basically these giant, weirdly cute but deadly green guys who are very clearly wearing rubber, and because they are just people in rubber suits. And it's kind of okay. Actually, I'll give you a great example of why this works. Godzilla. I think most Godzilla fans would say that the old Godzilla is far more effective than the one from the Matthew Broderick movie, because making him a CGI iguana is not as terrifying as watching a suit that does this just by moving back and forth and stepping over paper mache buildings. There's something about that old approach that is better than doing it in CGI, and Doctor Who embraces that.
And again, it's not just the rubber suit. There's imagination gone into the design of the Slitheen.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Their faces look like babies,
Yes.
Giant green monsters with these
giant cutesy green cupids that will rip your face off.
Yeah.
There's something unusual about that concept. And so the fans love the Slitheen, and they just keep coming back. And I don't even think the writers expected that. I think they were probably intended to be a one-off. But they were just so fun. Like the Daleks, the Cybermen, the Weeping Angels, there's a reason these keep coming back. I don't think people expected the Slitheen, for example, to become a recurring villain on the Sarah Jane Adventures, which for Doy's sake is a spin-off of Doctor Who. But there's just something silly about the idea of these giant green killer babies that it's just great.
So for everyone just joining us, we are talking about Doctor Who. This is an impromptu live stream because this is an important day for Doctor Who fans. We currently have 5 concurrent viewers because we gave no time
to
tell anyone about this. So that's pretty cool, actually. One of our viewers is JD Schaffner, who we all know. He says, "Hey, I have that guy's book." So anyway, let's keep going. Doctor Who, talk to me about how the show has changed over time. Like, how long have you guys been a fan? Did you guys go through all the way to the very beginning?
You go first because you were a fan first.
Oh, well, it's been around since 1963. I think it was first broadcast.
That's how old you are?
That's not how old. So I was born in 1981, in between the 4th and 5th Doctors. But I only really sort of caught the arse end of it when it got cancelled in 1989, when Sylvester McCoy was the Doctor. And I have vivid memories of his companion Ace, played by Sophie Aldred, hiding under a climbing frame from a cheetah person on the back of a horse. And but then I really got into it then when I got after it was cancelled, and I actually had a little Peter Venkman figure that I put a coat and hat on and made Doctor Who. So because you didn't have Doctor Who figures back then, really.
Who are you going to call?
Paul Cornish. Modding action figures before it was cool.
Yeah. So, and I made like a little Dalek out of a toilet roll and stuff. And then I kind of
revisited. Probably what they did too.
Yes. And and then they brought it back briefly with Paul McGann in 1996 in a sort of joint American-British venture. And I think it did really well ratings-wise in Britain. But I think it went up against a really important episode of Roseanne, like John Goodman died or came back to life or something. I don't know.
There's something amusing about the idea that Roseanne killed Doctor Who. I don't know. Like, that's a crossover I never knew we needed.
Yeah. So they only did one episode with Paul McGann, but that kind of reignited my sort of love of it. And then when I was in university in the late 90s, early 2000s, then there was like a little secondhand shop that sold all the old VHS, and I would just buy them all and just watch them. And it's just not left me ever since then.
So you've seen everything.
I've seen, well, there are missing episodes. This is the thing about Doctor Who from the 60s. The BBC, like, repeats hadn't been invented in the 60s. So they deleted a bunch of episodes. And fans because they just
reused the master tapes.
Yeah, they just reused the tape. So because they didn't know they'd ever show them again, basically. So there's a bunch of like missing episodes. They've found a lot over the years. Like fans and collectors have found them, like missing tapes and stuff.
Yeah, we actually are very lucky. I think they found close to 60, right? Because there's 97 currently missing, but at one point it was in the 150 era.
Yeah. So,
and it would have been more if people hadn't stopped them. They would have just deleted everything.
Yeah, so we're really, and it's not just Doctor
Incredible
Who,
lack of foresight.
Loads of old British telly has gone missing because of that. So they've kind of recreated a lot of it because they've still got the soundtracks, because kids used to love it so much in the 60s. They used to sit next to the telly with a tape recorder. And from these recordings, we still have the soundtrack of everything.
Which is remarkable. Every episode exists in audio. I don't know how that's a stroke of luck. Also, they were telesnaps. They took a lot of pictures on set. And so they made reconstructions of the 97 missing episodes. So they, but it looks like this. and because there's only a limited number of telesnaps, this one might show up 8 times. But while you're seeing that and hearing the dialogue, Doctor, look, it's a Dalek. We must go get him. After a while, you're able to follow. Thankfully, that's not real dialogue. That would be terrible. But you're able to follow the story. I'll tell you this. It's a bit of a. It's a bit of a pain watching the first 2 Doctors runs, because all 97 missing episodes are during the first 2 Doctors runs, and so there's a lot of that. It's not like it's spread out over the show's history. So if you rewatch everything, it's a lot of time spent watching William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton just standing still.
But
it's treated like a radio drama.
Right, well, exactly. Yeah.
They have animated a few missing episodes, which
and they've done a relatively good job of them.
Yeah. But I find I don't watch the telesnaps reconstructions myself because, like Rich said, they're a bit distracting. The ones that are missing, I've listened to them as radio dramas, which they've made. They've got original actors back to sort of narrate the bits where no dialogue is happening, and it works really well as a radio drama. So some of my favorites from the 60s, like Marco Polo, and Dalek's Master Plan is one of my favorites as well. I've only ever listened to them, even though there are a few episodes of Dalek's Master Plan that still exist, because they work so well as radio dramas,
Dalek's Master Plan is, if I could have any of the missing dramas back, it would actually, you named the 2 that it would, I think most fans would say. But Dalek Master Plan is just utterly brilliant. And just so you know, the show kind of fell into several different categories in the beginning. You had historical dramas, so they would go back in time and meet famous people from history. You had
like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
It is very clear Bill and Ted's writers had seen Doctor Who. So that's why I smiled when you first mentioned that. I'm like, yeah, I think that's a very clear inspiration there. And it works. It's like a very, very comedic version of Doctor Who. But you had the historicals. You also had stories where they would go out into space. And inevitably there tended to be a pattern to how those stories went. They'd go to a space station or a planet, and the person running you'd have a military leader and a scientist, and they'd butt heads a lot, and people would die. And so, and due to their own mistakes, and the Doctor would try to fix things and be snippy about it, and then they'd move on. So you had stories that were set in various different categories, but what made it so fun, I think, and Paul chime in, is the regenerations, because nobody knew this was going to be part of the show until William Hartnell got sick, and he had to leave sooner than they were expecting to happen. But I'm going to backtrack for 1 second, because I just realized I didn't answer your question, which is how I got into it. I grew up. The show first broadcast in '63, but I was first broadcast in '68. So I wasn't present for the first 5 seasons, and in any case, it wasn't really airing here in the United States yet, but it started airing later on PBS. I came into it during the 3rd and 4th Doctor eras, and I only vaguely remember watching them, because I'm older than you guys, and I only vaguely remember watching these 2 eras. I remember like bits and pieces. I remember seeing them. And it's possible that there was a Troughton or 2 in there as well, which would second Doctor. But then it went off my radar. Like Paul, when the 1990s movie came out, it came back onto my radar. But it was still difficult at that point here to find it. It was a very niche thing in the United States. It was the United Kingdom's Star Trek, so it was everywhere for them. Here, it was a lot harder to find. That all changed in the mid-2000s because the show came back and became very successful here. And suddenly you could find everything. And my friend Paul Giacchetti was a fan and pulled me into it. And I thought, oh my God, this is a huge franchise. I'm already into too many huge franchises. I don't know if we're going to do this. But we ended up watching everything. And that was when I became hooked. And so there's the answer to your question. But what I really loved about it when I finally got to watch this was watching how it developed from one actor to the next, because it is the same person, but each person, it's not just, for example, like replacing a character with a new actor and hoping they'll just channel the original, right? Each person has their own unique personality, their own unique traits, their own unique likes and dislikes. And so you go from a very grumpy but kindly old man to a buffoon, to an arrogant guy who does martial arts, to a really silly guy who loves jelly babies, which is a candy, to a guy who likes to play football. Well, the point is he likes to play. Oh my
cricket.
God, cricket. Thank you. I don't know why. I can't put it out there.
Because you're an American.
No, I know full well that he plays cricket. I don't know what happened. My brain just turned off. Never live stream, Rich. But each of these actors is recognizably the same guy, even though the first one is a little Albert Einstein-y and the fifth one is a heartthrob. Right?
Why are there changes? Why are there changes between the iterations? Like if they're the same guy?
So
yeah,
so their time. He's a Time Lord, basically, and Time Lords come from the planet Gallifrey, and they have the ability to regenerate after they die. So that means they can just basically grow themselves a new body, and to a certain extent, like Rich says, a new personality. And this was sort of retroactively given to the character to explain why they changed the character, but it essentially means that the show can go on forever because they can keep changing actors. And
it never grows stale. If you have the same person, like if you have Sherlock Holmes for 70 years, you just have Sherlock Holmes. But what if in addition to Sherlock Holmes, you also have, I don't know, Bill and Ted? What if the next version of Sherlock Holmes and Watson were Bill and Ted, right? It's just so crazy, it might work. And that's
I'm writing that down now, and I am going to sell that to someone.
But like, this also means that every few years you get to do the death of Doctor Who, and
right.
It's
and how many shows can do that?
Yeah, because you grow attached to these particular iterations of the character. So it's not like in when they kill off Batman or something in the comics. Batman's going to come back and he's going to be he's going to be Batman, but you grow attached to a certain portrayal of the Doctor, and the Doctor actually says in one episode, it feels like a death. A part of me dies and a new person goes swanning off. So it's there's some weight to it each time it happens.
It's metaphysical too, because if regeneration is basically their version of reincarnation. So you retain, but with retaining the memories and the values you had as that previous person, even though you are now something new.
If you're just joining us, we are talking about Doctor Who. This is an impromptu live stream. We have gotten 11 views, which is amazing to me.
Hey, it's one more than 10.
We literally plugged this right before we went on the air. This is an important day for Doctor Who fans. Everybody, if you have any comments, leave them in the chat. We'll read them out here. Tell me, earlier you were talking about how the Daleks were basically space Nazis. Are they still that over the years?
Yeah, I mean,
but I was told that entertainment shouldn't be political.
This is it. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, like, people are like, oh, they're bringing politics into Doctor Who, just like with everything else, But yeah, right for like the Daleks turned up in the second serial, the second story basically of the first ever series of Doctor Who in 1964, and they were very explicitly Nazis. They are like, this person isn't like us. They're not Daleks. We've got to kill them. That is their reason for existing. And it doesn't get more political than that.
Science fiction fans are strange sometimes. They will say things like, "Why did you have to make it political?" about Star Trek, right? A show that from its very, very roots was always political. About Doctor Who, which went space Nazi in its second story. I wouldn't be surprised if the next version of Twilight Zone gets people going, why does Twilight Zone have to do social commentary? Because that's how absurd a statement it is to ask why Doctor Who and Star Trek went political, because it always was.
Absolutely. Yeah. And people who say it wasn't are lying to you and themselves.
Or they just simply haven't seen it. Or the truth is, some of them are simply, pushing an agenda and don't care about the show. They just, but that's another story.
The truth is, a lot of the time when I think what happens is they grow up, they're unaware of politics, so they only know theirs. So now when politics that aren't there shows up, then it's political, right? If something came out with exactly their politics, that's not political. That's just the way life is.
That's the way life is. Yeah. That's a really good perspective. But it also means that, and this is going to sound like gatekeeping, and I don't mean it to at all, because I really hate gatekeeping. It means that they kind of missed the point of the show that they watched, because the whole point of science fiction and comics and fantasy, it challenges you. You're supposed to not just go, well, this is the way the world is. Well, especially with fantasy, because dragons don't exist. But these genres are really designed to challenge your beliefs. Like anyone who reads X-Men and doesn't understand that X-Men is political is really not reading X-Men, as gatekeeping as that sounds. I don't understand when people say, when did X-Men become political? And the same is true with Doctor Who. And it's not just Daleks. I mean, so many different aspects of the old show resonate today. And I found that in the last 2 years as I did a complete rewatch of everything.
It's everything, right?
Very dated, but some of it is also very relevant. I'm sorry, what was your question?
No, it's everything, right? It's like everyone talks about 1984 by George Orwell and how he accurately predicted the future. It's like George Orwell was writing about what was going on at the time he was writing it. It had nothing to do with the year 1984. Science fiction is about using the future to talk about the present.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another appeal of, like, watching a show as old as Doctor Who is that it's a time capsule. It's like when you go back and read old comics, you can't separate it from the time it was made, So you're getting a glimpse of the status quo in 1963, in the 70s and the 80s or whatever. There's one in the 80s where the villain is basically Margaret Thatcher. It's...
I actually really like that one. Yeah,
it's great. It's brilliant. Yeah. The Happiness Patrol, that one's called.
Oh, absolutely. It's a silly set of episodes there, but it's a lot of fun.
The fact that it's still the fact that space Nazis can resonate today as much as it did all those years ago that's a statement on history more than anything.
Oh yeah, it is.
Well, yeah.
Good.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, please.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say what I think part of the reason why a lot of fans might miss the fact that the Daleks are space Nazis is because they do look like giant pepper shakers and scream a lot and have toilet plungers for weapons. And so if you're focused on the toilet plunger, the screaming, and I do mean screaming, everything is said 3 times and really loud. I guess that it is easy to not notice the Hitler parallel. Since he didn't like a giant pepper shaker and a toilet plunger. But that's
what if you put a mustache?
Well, that's the thing. All the Daleks should have had a mustache. That would have made things clearer. But that also highlights the brilliance of the genre in general, because you can slip messages past people who aren't looking for them. So censors and the government who might, any governments that might prevent people from commenting negatively. Star Trek has a classic episode where people are black on one side, white on the other, and they kind of look like bakery cookies, but the episode is actually about the absurdity of racism, because you don't even notice as an audience that one of them is black on the left and the other one is black on the right until the episode, in this great moment, has them pointed out. And the first time you see it, you don't even notice it. And Kirk, who is only one color, is confused as hell as to why these two people who look exactly like to him hate each other, until they point out, what are you, crazy? He's black on the left side. I'm black on the right side. And only then do Kirk and the audience go, holy crap, that's true. And it points out the absurdity of racism, right? In a very silly way. I think the Daleks as Nazis are a good example of this. If you start digging beneath, you go, oh, obviously they're Nazis. But they're also hilarious. Which is, it should. Other than Hogan's Heroes, when have Nazis ever been hilarious, right? So,
I mean, going away from the sort of Nazi thing, maybe, is that the humor of the Daleks is something worth talking about. I think because it's when you first see them and they're going exterminate, and you just kind of think, oh, they're just like the Borg or something. They're just like these emotionless robots, but they're not. They've got emotions. They're just all negative emotions. So there's episodes where you see the Daleks being like really sassy or like, really spiteful, and they're just little gits. They are basically
and sassy with each other too, not just with their enemies. It gets very funny at times.
Like there's an episode of the sort of newer series from like 2006 or something where they're fighting the Cybermen who are more like the Borg.
Such a funny scene.
They're more robotic and emotionless. And they're arguing with the Cybermen about who is more superior, the Cybermen or the Daleks. And the Daleks are like, you are better than us in one respect. And the Cybermen's like, what respect? You are better at dying. It's just really silly.
Yeah, trash talk between two alien robotic societies. It's pretty damn funny.
Yeah. How has the show changed? Like over the years, like where were the turning points?
Where do you even begin on that? It has changed in so many ways.
Do you know what it is? It's
I didn't write the agenda.
During the 80s, one of the reasons I think it got cancelled is that it was getting left behind in a lot of respects, especially with, special effects and all that. At the time Doctor Who was airing in the late 80s, you had Next Gen being aired as well in the UK. And the Star Trek Next Generation, and the differences were very, very apparent, and I think it just sort of like, the actors they got to play Doctor Who. I mean, I just want to say Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy are two of my favorites. I think they're absolutely brilliant.
Same here.
But they didn't come from the same sort of stock as the earlier actors. Like, for example, William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton were very serious actors, and John Pertwee, he was a very experienced comedy actor, whereas Colin Baker, he was a soap star before it, and Sylvester McCoy, he was more of a sort of all-round entertainer sort of guy. He was known for doing nude escapology, and literally putting ferrets down his trousers, and they were both brilliant, but I think there was this perception that the show didn't have the same gravitas that it used to. So I remember before 2005, when it came back, people would talk about, who's going to play Doctor Who, and they were talking about people like Ken Dodd, who is this very old British comedian who was a brilliant comedian, but he was very much a comedian, a sort of very silly comedian and not an actor. Or they're talking about Paul Daniels, who again was this sort of magician. He was known as a magician rather than an actor, and people didn't really see it as a serious show.
So although I should point out that both of them would have been fun in the role.
Oh, absolutely.
Although it might not still be on the air now. Like, I don't know. I think they went the right direction.
Yeah, so when Russell T Davies Russell T Davies is this really sort of big British writer. He's Welsh as well, I should point out, and he is one of the UK's best writers, basically. So when he brought it back, that in itself, that he was attached to it, was a statement. And then he cast Christopher Eccleston as the Doctor, who again is this very serious actor known for these very serious roles, and not including Thor: The Dark World. I might add. This was before Thor: The Dark World. Yeah. You know?
Don't hold that one against him. Yeah.
Yeah, he was known for these very serious, gritty roles that he would take on. So that in itself was a statement too. So when it came back, it did retain a lot of the old silliness and a lot of the old heart, and the core concept, an immortal alien going around time, fixing things in a police box. That was the same, that was exactly the same. And he fought the same baddies and stuff, but it had these more sophisticated special effects. It was done on a bigger budget, and everything about it was like, no, we're doing this properly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
reverentially, that was the cool thing. They were doing it properly, but not discarding what came before, and that was extraordinary.
Exactly. Yeah. So to answer your question, in a lot of ways, it's exactly the same. But in other ways, it has changed with the times, to say like, no, we are a serious program. And I would say it's in need of another shakeup. It has become a bit too reliant on old plot lines and self-referential in that way. And so it does need another shakeup. But as luck would have it, Russell T Davies is coming back to it next year. At exactly the right time cometh the hour, cometh the man, so I think there's good times ahead for the show.
I think that major shakeup you mentioned is exactly what they have in mind too. I don't think it's coincidence that Davies is coming back. And for those who don't watch the show, the reason why this is a big thing right now is that Jodie Whittaker's run ends tonight, and there will be a trilogy of one-off special episodes that may or may not include the next Dr. Ncuti Gatwa. We're not really sure exactly what's happening next, but he's stepping into the role at some point. And in between, the actor David Tennant is coming back. So a lot is in some capacity, but a lot is happening right now, right after a series from Jodie Whittaker in which most of the universe was destroyed. So there's a lot that's going on at a time where they're bringing back the producer who made the show great again. So we'll see. Oh God, I just inadvertently did that, didn't I?
Yeah.
No, that was not where I was going with that. But rewind. But yeah, so I suspect...
We're live, Rich. There's no taking it back now.
So I suspect that Davies is going to do a major shakeup, and it's going to be fantastic.
Because that's the thing about Doctor Who, is that it needs to change with the times, and whenever it hasn't managed to change with the times, that's when ratings have dropped. And I think that's where we are at the moment with the show, unfortunately. And that's no criticism of the writers or the cast, because Jodie Whittaker was a fantastic Doctor. She was so good. And Chris Chibnall, who's been producing and writing it at the moment, he's been doing a good job, I reckon. But I just think where he's failed is he's been carrying on the same old way of doing it, I think. And you just can't do that for too long. You need a shake-up.
So was it a case where they were going, they were going with the times. They cast the first ever woman as Doctor Who, but then the plot stayed exactly the same, was it?
That's it. I mean, that's my interpretation. Yeah.
And in fact, in many ways, they went with the times, because not only was, I mean, there actually was a semi-official Doctor Who story in the past that had the female actor playing the Doctor, but it is more of a comedy special than anything. So Jodie Whittaker became the first female lead. Then they introduced Jo Martin as a heretofore unknown previous incarnation of the Doctor. So the first Black woman playing Doctor, and then revealed that that Whittaker's character was attracted to a female companion. So it was one unexpected change in Doctor Who, and a good change, in my opinion, in each case, right after another. So you'd think that this run of seasons would have been more notable, because it was making these big changes. But I think Paul nailed and you in your question nails what the problem was. And I actually liked these seasons. The first time I watched them, I didn't. I don't know. I enjoyed the cast a lot, but they didn't really connect with me. When I rewatched them recently, I came to really appreciate that these were a great set of stories, but they are more of the same. And I think that the show should have been a little more different if it was going to bring the character in different directions.
For me, it's the show is at its best when it embraces that it's for children too, you know? And yeah, it's scary and it can be violent and it can deal with big themes at certain times. But, you know, kids can handle that to a certain extent, you know? And I think it's always at its best when it keeps in mind that some of its audience are children. And I think now it's got to the point where people like me and Rich are enjoying it, but we're in our 40s and 50s and we're old school fans, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's got to get the kids back, and I think hopefully that's where it'll go next. You know,
when you go back to the show's creation, a kid audience was very much in mind. They obviously wanted to pull in adult viewers as well, so that the use of humor and so forth was there to pull in the parents, but the children were definitely who they were originally aiming for.
Yeah, and they've lost that a bit.
Talk to me about your favorite Doctors.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Can I go first, Rich? Is that okay?
Of course, yeah.
You can indeed go first.
I mean, I love them all, right? There's people who say, I hate this Doctor, and I just don't see how you can do that, because they are essentially the same person, and every single one of them brings something wonderful to the part. But my absolute favourite is, I've already mentioned him, Colin Baker. Here he is in action figure form. So the thing about Colin, to me, that makes him one of my makes him my favourite, is that I really like the grumpy Doctors in particular. You know, like William Hartnell, Peter Capaldi, John Pertwee to a certain extent. They were more grumpy than the other Doctors, and Colin Baker was really grumpy and a bit volatile. He'd lose his temper, and he's quite sort of pompous as well. And the way I would describe Colin Baker's Doctor is if Fraser Crane was Doctor Who. Imagine a British Fraser as Doctor Who. I mean, and that is him. There's me and Colin Baker. Production of HMS Pinafore in Cardiff, where I was living at the time, and we hung around afterwards. We met him in the bar afterwards, and we came after him and said, "Did you enjoy it?" And we said yes, it was brilliant. And he said, "Are you music students?" And we just looked at our feet and looked a bit sheepish, and we went, "No, we're Doctor Who fans." And he was like, "No, that's okay, you're allowed to exist." And they had just announced that the show was coming back in 2005 with Russell T Davies. And he was so excited. And that's the wonderful thing about Colin Baker, is that he's a fan too. So as he was signing autographs for us, he was talking about how excited he was that they just announced that the show was coming back. The second time I met him was when I had that photograph taken. That was a few years ago. And I turned to him before the photo was taken. I said, "I think you're brilliant." And he said, "You're not so bad yourself." And then the third time I met him, I'd actually drawn a picture for a competition I was entering, and it was a picture of him. And I explained to him, "I'm going to give you this picture to sign, and I've drawn it for this competition." So he had a look at it, and he said, "Oh, well, you're all right. It's not shit." And then he signed it for me and chatted. So each time I've met Colin Baker, he's validated my existence in some way. First time he said, "You're allowed to exist." Second time he said, "You're not so bad yourself." And the third time he said, "Oh, you're all right. It's not shit." So he has literally enriched my life in that sense. I've met other Doctors too, but he's the one that's maybe closest to my heart. So that's why I love Colin Baker.
This might be why you and I get along, because I know that a lot of fans are divided on the Colin Baker run because it's different than what came before. But I happen to adore the Colin Baker run. One of the things that throws people about this one is that his very first act as the Doctor is to try to murder his companion because his head is all screwed up. And that's not something any previous Doctor or any Doctor since then ever would have done. But it's a great start to a run, especially when the previous Doctor, in the moment of dying, suspected something was wrong with the next generation. So Colin Baker is a Doctor who is different than the rest, and I think it is a great it's a great persona. And also, I'm with you on the grumpy because I think Pertwee and Capaldi are fantastic. I don't know that I have a specific one favorite. If you include Joe Martin, Paul McGann, and John Hurt, who have played kind of like one-off or two-off Doctors, there have been 16 people as leads. And then there's like 100 others, people playing replacement Doctors and children versions of the Doctor. But those 16, which are the ones actually in that image at the beginning of this podcast, I don't think there's a bad one in the bunch. We've been blessed in that regard. All 16 of them were right for the job. All 16 of them made the role their own. So yeah, you're going to see elements of, for example, Matt Smith in Jodie Whittaker. You'll see elements of Hartnell in Capaldi. But they're all believably the same person. The ones that really work for me, I'm a major fan of Peter Troughton. It kills me that most of Troughton's run is missing, because I absolutely love him in the role. Patrick Troughton. I just realized what I just said. Patrick Troughton. I really love Colin Baker, and from the new run, it's a toss-up because I think they're all great. But Capaldi and Smith, Matt Smith, I think, are the ones that to me, I can watch anything they're in and still and love it even when it's not great. But that's kind of true for all the Doctors. There's great elements from every single era.
Absolutely.
Okay, tell me favorite companions, because I believe a companion is an essential element of Doctor Who.
There's so many of them. It's yeah, the idea behind the very first thing you see when the show starts off is basically introducing the companions. The Doctor is traveling with his granddaughter Susan and lands at a school where there are these two teachers, Ian and Barbara, and the TARDIS breaks. It's a police call box, because that's the era that he lands in, and the ship no longer is able to change shape after that. And it's one of the better bits of whimsy the show came up with, is it spends the next several thousand years traveling like a police call box throughout time and space, even though the whole purpose of it looking like that is that it's supposed to blend in with the background. Like, if you land in a mountain, it'll look like a mountain. If you land in a forest, it'll look like a tree, so that nobody can see it. But it broke, and he, instead of fixing it, he spent several thousand years traveling in essence as a phone box. So from the beginning, we meet these three companions, and then every couple of seasons, one leaves or is fired or quits or whatever, and they bring another one in. I'm just setting that up as to what you mean by companions. But Paul, why don't you tell yours first?
So traditionally, the companions are usually female. Sorry, I sound like some incel there saying female. Sorry, I don't know. It's live. They're traditionally women, they're girls. And they're all brilliant in their own way. But my favorite...
Wait, hold on. Stay with me, because think I might have closed the live stream.
Oh.
Can you check if it's still going?
Now it's a dead stream.
It's a dead stream. Oh.
Let me have a look.
It's a dead stream. We're going to have to... Yeah, we'll have to redo it.
Oh, no.
Because I think I might have closed the live stream.
Oh,
is it still going?
It's still going. It's still going. We're live.
Now it's become Doyception. It's a live stream where we're watching a live stream.
That's weird. Let me
I think we're
keep
okay.
going. Oh, okay, yeah, okay, we're going.
See, what just happened is that the TARDIS went back in time
Yes.
and revisited 36 seconds earlier in the phone call.
Okay, so we're back. Okay.
Woo!
So let's do it. Yeah.
Companions.
So Paul, keep going. Your companions.
So yeah, usually they're women, but sort of atypically, my favorite tend to be the men. I don't know why. But my favorite is one of the ones that Rich mentioned, Ian, who's one of the first two companions. And he's this sort of like gentle science teacher who wears a cardigan, but he's also like the hardest bastard you'll ever meet. Like, you know, because wherever they go, he's kind of like the heartthrob, the male heartthrob. So even though he's this gentle teacher in a cardigan, he's able to basically kick ass wherever they go. He's played by a guy called William Russell, who was also in Superman the movie. He was one of the Kryptonian Council. And that's not just the reason he's my favorite. I don't know. I think he's just absolutely great. William Russell's a very charismatic actor. I met him a few years ago. He's in his 90s now, so it's very privileged to meet him. I also really like the Brigadier. In the 70s, the Doctor was exiled to Earth by the other Time Lords. And so he kind of hitches up with this United Nations task force dedicated to fighting alien invasions called UNIT. And the leader of UNIT is Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. And he's this sort of very stuffy British military type who's very different from the Doctor in every way. Who's this sort of the Doctor's like this cosmic beatnik, you know, and the Brigadier is this stereotypical British military man, and they become best friends, which is really lovely, even though they're so different. So he's my
even
favorite.
Though they bicker all the time.
Yeah, they bicker all the time.
Their entire worldview is so contrary, and yet they're like this. Yeah.
So he's my favorite as well, and he pops up again throughout the run as well, and meets some other Doctors as well. And the Doctor's always like really happy to see him, you know, which is lovely.
And what's wild is it's the same actor, so he gets older over the course of decades, and meets multiple incarnations of the Doctor, and each time is just as excited to meet. It's fun.
Yeah. So, Rich, who's your favorite companions?
From the classic era, I'm like you. I like a lot of them, you know. So it's hard to nail that because there really is an extraordinarily long list of companions at this point. But for me, two stand out from the classic era. One is Jamie McCrimmon, a Scottish Highlander who spends who comes from an era that would not understand the technology inside the TARDIS. They've done that a couple of times, and it doesn't always work. But in Jamie's case, it absolutely worked. His what's the word I'm looking for? His chemistry with the Doctor was fantastic. Just creating some of the funniest companion scenes. And the other one is Ace. Ace was the companion of the seventh Doctor, played by Sylvester McCoy. Sophie Aldred played Ace, and she's fantastic. A teenager, which is atypical for him. She's on the young side as far as companions go, but that she and this Doctor she calls Professor. The chemistry there is fantastic. She might be my all-time favorite, but Jamie comes close. And from the new show, Rory and Amy Pond, because they did something unusual there, which has had a couple traveling with them. Probably Bill Potts. Bill Potts is from the Peter Capaldi era, and you could write the way that character leaves the show is heartbreaking, truly heartbreaking. And that's one of the things about Doctor Who, when you have dozens and dozens of companions, some of them leave voluntarily, some of them die, some of them have terrible things happen to them, and when they do, it's often the Doctor's fault, which is part of the show's it's part of where some of the show's emotional appeal comes from, because the Doctor is going to live for thousands more years, and as heartbreaking as it is for the audience to see someone die terribly, 800 years later, that's a blip for the Doctor, who still retains the memory and the emotion. but the doctor's perspective on things is very different than ours. So what happens to Bill Potts is terrible, but the doctor goes on, even though we're left going, oh my God.
There's an episode where Matt Smith's Doctor, the 11th Doctor, he's kind of on his own and he's trying to put off his own regeneration, the circumstances that he knows will lead to his own regeneration. He's sort of in denial about it. And he phones up the rest home where he knows the Brigadier is, as an old man. And you get this impression that like the Doctor's been visiting the Brigadier on and off throughout his life, trying to sort of stretch out this relationship for as long as he possibly can. Because relative to the Doctor, it's been thousands of years for the Doctor, but for the Brigadier, it's just, a few decades as he's gotten older. And so Matt Smith's Doctor, he phones this care home and says, "Oh, get the Brigadier on the phone. I'm going to want to meet up with him again." And they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, the Brigadier's passed away." And that's it, that's no more adventures for the Doctor with the Brigadier, and he's just hit by that. And I just thought it was really lovely how he'd been trying to stretch that relationship out for so long. But
because he's lost so many others at that point.
Yeah.
And each time it was just a blip.
Yeah, but there's only so far he can stretch it with with human lives. I want to mention Donna as well from the new series.
Love Donna.
Played by Catherine Tate, who American audiences will recognize from the later series of The Office, the American Office. But she's absolutely brilliant because she's one of these companions who will call the Doctor on his crap. When the Doctor's being too pompous or when the Doctor's being hypocritical, Donna's will go, "Oi, spaceman!" and just call him on his crap. So for that reason, Donna is up there with the best as well.
Absolutely. Also, Donna follows a set of seasons in which the Doctor atypically seems to be getting it on a lot, or at least flirting a lot. If you go back for the classic 7 Doctors over the course of decades, really no love stories other than like one fake marriage proposal. And all of a sudden, in the new show, basically all the companions are really hot, and the Doctor notices. And it's weird to see all of a sudden these regenerations doing this. So, but they're still great characters, despite the fact that the show felt the need to bring sex and romance into what was a character that didn't rely on that for storytelling. But then Donna comes along and calls him on his crap, on the fact that the previous, like the types of people that he seemed to surround himself by beautiful women, which is something the show wasn't acknowledging, and the two of them laugh at the idea of any romance between them. Like the show was basically saying, okay, let's take a step back and recognize the Doctor and his companion are traveling companions. They're friends. This is not, if you see this TARDIS rockin', don't come a knockin', which is where, so yeah, Donna was a great departure from what came before that. And that's kind of actually what I'm hoping Davies will do. Well, actually, Davies is, because Donna's coming back. But I'm kind of hoping the show will start having departures from that norm.
I'm going to say hi to Lamar, Monica, and Aaron, who are in the chat. And of course, the next question will be a joint question. What are your favorite stories, and what are some good jumping on points for new fans? Because I got to tell you, if I'm jumping into Doctor Who, I'm not watching everything.
I mean, I'm really glad you asked that, because I think me and Rich may have given the impression that it's this really dense thing, which it is. It's this really big, dense thing. But at its best, it should be really easy to jump into, right? Because it's this, you summed it up at the start, what it is. Just this time-traveling bloke in a police box who goes around anywhere and picks up people occasionally and has adventures, and that's as complicated as it needs to be, really. Everything else is a bonus. And I said time-traveling bloke, it could be a time-traveling woman as well.
I should point that out, that we keep saying he, but it should be they.
Yeah. Doctor Who can be a man or a woman. That's another beauty of the character. But so I would say the best jumping on point that I would recommend to you and new viewers is the start of the 2005 series, the start of Christopher Eccleston's run when Russell T Davies brought it back, an episode called Rose, and watch from Rose. And then if you want to, you can go back and look at the classic era, and you can drop in anywhere on those stories. You know, they're all pretty accessible. But I would start with Rose if you're coming to it fresh.
I very much concur with Paul. Part of the problem is, well, there's twofold. One, the original series ran a very long time, 26 seasons and a movie. And so to say start at the beginning means telling you to spend the next 2 years watching television. But there's also the fact that we mentioned the missing episodes. If you start with the classic series, you're dooming yourself to having to sit through 97 reconstructions or audio onlys. And that can be very much a put off for new fans. When they relaunched with the episode Rose, they did a very, very smart move, which is they set it as a continuation. The other stuff happened, but it's also self-contained. If you've never seen anything before Rose, you're being introduced to the Time Lord. You're being introduced to the TARDIS. You're being introduced to the various ongoing villains and the concept of companions. It's all there. There's nothing that will leave you confused or I don't understand what the show's about. And so Rose is a really good jumping off point. And then you at that point have 13 seasons to sit through, which if you count up the old show and the new, you're talking close to 40 seasons. It's overwhelming. But the beauty of it is the show does sequels to old stuff. And so when you're introduced to elements you don't know, you can just go to the Doctor Who Wikia and look up what to watch. And that may build an appreciation of the old show. And at that point, you can say, well, I actually just watched, 2 Colin Baker episodes and it was fun. Maybe I'll watch the Colin Baker era. Because the thing about Doctor Who is that every era builds on what came before, but it's also self-contained. You can just sit and watch Colin Baker. You might be a little confused at things, but you will see an arc that you can enjoy without having seen 1 to 5. Would you agree with that, Paul?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely, yeah.
Do you think one of the reasons that Doctor Who got such a big, boost in the 2000s is because of things like Wikipedia and wikis and all that stuff?
I'm sure it helped. Because that information's right there at your fingertips. So yeah.
I mean, it helped eventually, but like Rich said, Rose, you don't need to know anything with Rose.
Right.
Everything you go to the wikis for is a bonus,
Right.
And obviously over the course of 13 seasons then up until the present day, it gets more dense and self-referential, and then Wikipedia comes into play. But if
because they start bringing back the old doctors, so if at that point you might get confused as to who is this person here. Like they brought back Paul McGann, the doctor who just had the TV movie in the 90s, and it was a monumental moment because everybody loves McGann even though he only had one movie. So bringing him back was great. If you've never seen the movie, you go, I don't get it. Who is this new guy? So there are some, but that's a minor thing. And that's where the Wikia and Wikipedia help.
Yeah, but that comes later. If you start with Rose, you're starting fresh, absolutely.
All right, let's get down to it. The reason we are live streaming tonight is because Jodie Whittaker leaves the show today. And as you have as you have educated me on, that means she will die, right?
Yeah.
That means she will die. Like, so how do you feel like going into something knowing that the main character is going to die?
That's a good question. It is unusual, right? You don't normally go into watching something knowing that pretty much every character you like will die, even the ones who you don't see. When they go 1,000 years in the future, every companion you've met so far is dead. I think okay, to answer that question, I think maybe we go back to the first regeneration, because when William Hartnell was getting sick, they were left with the question of, do we keep the show going and have a new actor, or do we just cancel it even though people like it? In order to keep it going, do we then go forward and say, well, that we have to come up with a reason for it? Do we acknowledge that this happened, that there's a new actor? And if we're going to acknowledge it, what does that mean when the next actor leaves? What that means is that they can wipe the slate clean and start with something new and unusual so that the audience is not going to know what to expect next. So if you go from this grumpy old man to a goofy guy who likes to play the flute, which was something he never did before, the audience now has no idea what to expect from this new guy, but they're going to love him. So when you watch Doctor Who now and you see Jodie Whittaker, you know, Jodie, from the moment Jodie Whittaker was announced, that we would also see Jodie Whittaker die, which is a unique take on TV, because we now are going into knowing that Gatwa, her replacement, is going to be coming in soon. We also know Gatwa's going to die. And you don't normally go into a show knowing this. You would think it would seem fatalistic. Like, there's no point. Everyone's going to die. It's like, why make a Titanic Part 2? But at the same time, I think that it gives you a finite period of an infinite person's lifetime. This person could conceivably go on forever, but you're now entering the next phase of this person's life, and you're going to leave it too, which means it's going to be heartbreaking. And there's something, I don't know, there's something fascinating by the idea that when I see this begin and end, there will be renewal at the end.
Poignant.
Yes, absolutely poignant. Because, yeah, I always go into these regeneration episodes with like sadness and excitement, because I'm excited to see the new Doctor, but I'm really sad to let the other one go. You know.
So, do they always cast the next Doctor for the season season finale of the current Doctor?
Like, yeah, I
yes and no. It hasn't always happened in the finale.
Okay.
But mostly, you know,
yes.
you see the next Doctor at the end,
right?
And they'll
actually, in the new show, it's been that way. It wasn't always the case in the original, but yes, in the new show, it does end with introducing. Sometimes you'll just see this, and you go, "What was that?" Yeah.
But they're doing something a bit unique in this sense, because next year is the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. You know, so it's been 60 years since November 1963. It was first broadcast. November 2023 will be the 60th anniversary. So I think they were faced with a situation where they've got a new production team and Russell T Davies coming back, and they're going to have a new Doctor, but they didn't want to do the 60th, the anniversary, which anniversary times is traditionally a self-reflective time for the show. They'll look back on the show and they'll celebrate things that came before. You can't do that with a brand new Doctor. So what it looks like they're doing, which is really quite clever, is bringing David Tennant back temporarily just for next year. And in mysterious circumstances, we don't know. This is the first time the Doctor has turned into an old version of themselves.
Although we did get a glimpse of it, because Tom Baker, the fourth Doctor, came back as a much older version of the Doctor.
Yeah, so
the curator, and we've yet to find out what exactly was up with that.
So we know it can happen.
So it can happen, and at the time he tells the current Doctor, there will come a point where you will start choosing to revisit old faces, and we've apparently now reached that point. Or have we? Because I'm not convinced that's what's going on. It's either there are other options. There's a human version of the Doctor who happens to be played by that actor, and it could be him. There's also, the Doctor has a nemesis called the Master, who, like the Doctor, keeps changing actors. It could be him. It could be something else entirely. There's an old villain, most likely the Celestial Toymaker, coming back, and he likes to screw with people's heads. It could be an illusion. It's hard to say. We don't know. And that's part of the fun of it. But it is a great way to look back and get that 60th anniversary perspective before Gatwa comes in and takes it in a new direction.
I do feel like David Tennant, from my, just from osmosis, I feel like he is a very popular Doctor.
He's probably the most, like, if you're talking classic Doctor Who, Tom Baker's probably the most popular one. If you're talking new Doctor Who, it's David Tennant, definitely.
Absolutely. There's a reason that he and Donna, who might be on the new show, they might be the most popular Doctor companion combo, and so it makes sense.
Absolutely.
You know what's wild, by the way, about Donna? You brought up the American version of The Office. I saw that before I watched Doctor Who. the new version, and I really didn't like her character at all. One of my least favorite characters on the show. And so when we started watching Doctor Who and I found out she was going to play one of the companions, I thought, oh boy. And she turned out to be one of the very best things ever to happen to Doctor Who, which just shows that sometimes even a really gifted actor can end up in the wrong role. And it's not
sometimes it's the role, yeah.
Sometimes it's the role, yeah. So my opinion of her so changed with Donna that I've rewatched The Office and love her character.
Yeah. But yeah, to go back to what you were originally asking, like I think like there's always this sadness and excitement, but this time there's this added layer of excitement because we know the Doctor's going to turn into David Tennant again before he turns into Ncuti Gatwa, but we don't know why, and we don't know what's going on there. So there's
an infinite number of possibilities there. That's the thing, and that's part of the fun of it. Although it also means that we may be shooting too high. Like if we expect this to be something extraordinary and it's just another Doctor Who story, in any other season that would have been great. So I hope that we don't. I hope we haven't overhyped ourselves here.
What if it's just a flashback?
Right, that's an example. Yeah.
Do you know what? At the very least, though, we're going to see David Tennant back on the screen in Doctor Who again, which is not going to be a bad thing. You know,
that's exactly what I mean. In any other season, having Tennant and Donna back would have been amazing. We've all kind of hyped this into our heads of Kirk's meeting Picard, and then we go, well, that's Kirk met Picard, but like I'm hoping it's not that.
But tonight is all going to be about Jodie. If we do see David Tennant tonight, it'll be for like 2 minutes. Tonight will be all about like Jodie's last adventure, which is.
Do you think exciting. We will? Do you think that Tennant will show up tonight?
That's the thing. I think so, but I couldn't say for sure, which is really exciting. But I don't know what's going to happen.
I think what you just said is a good way to answer one of Duy's previous questions. The truth is, you would think that a show that has run as many seasons as it has, we're entering the 40th season if you combine the two shows, plus there have been numerous spin-offs, plus countless books and audios and comics, you would think it would get stale, right? But the very fact is we're going into tonight's episode going, I don't know what's going to happen. This is exciting, which is really unusual in a franchise as expansive as this is, especially a franchise that is cyclical. Because it's not where you're introducing new crews and new ships and new concepts like Star Trek does, for example. Doctor Who just keeps going back to the beginning of its cycle every few seasons. And yet here we are entering the 40th season of Doctor Who going, this is amazing. I don't know what's going to happen, which is
you are supposed to know what's going to happen because it is cyclical.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's what's so fun about it, is that you don't know, and yet you obviously do. There's going to be a new Doctor and new companions and new adventures, and they'll fight Daleks again, and then the Doctor will die. But somehow it's brand new and totally unpredictable. And I don't know how they do it, but it works really well.
In 5 years, how do you think people will look at Jodie Whittaker's time on Doctor Who?
People always look more kindly back than they do when they're the
Colin Baker is a great example.
Yeah,
Colin Baker has become a fan favorite, and his run was not well received.
No, at the time.
I think
it's
going to be the same thing.
Yeah, Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy, they were seen for a while as the actors who killed Doctor Who.
Yeah,
that's not true at all, but that's how it was perceived by a lot of people at the time.
Yeah, see, unfortunately, Colin Baker didn't leave of his own volition, and that's what fed into that. The show was having ratings problems and so forth, and the studio basically made him the scapegoat. And so he's remembered as the guy that started the downward spiral of killing Doctor Who, and it's an extremely unfair label because he was fantastic. And people have come to realize that it's like George Lazenby on Her Majesty's Secret Service. He was the first time that he Doctor Who'd, that James Bond regenerated in essence. And it was after 5 Connery movies, so people didn't accept it. But in time, people have come to realize that On Her Majesty's Secret Service is one of the best movies in the series. And I think that the same thing happened with Colin Baker, and it may happen with Jodie Whittaker.
I think I think we're seeing it happen now because, like, Doctor Who, it's down in the ratings. It's not like the phenomenon it was when David Tennant was the Doctor. And I think a lot of people are saying, well, they changed it to a woman, rah, 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 you know. And that's nonsense. There's lots of reasons why, you know, I've touched on it. They're not aiming for the kids as much as they should anymore. That's a big reason for me why it's down in the ratings. But Jodie is fantastic, and there have been amazing stories during her run. And I think people are very soon going to be looking back on this era a lot more kindly than a lot of people are now. But there's a bit of irony to it, though. Bit of poetic justice, maybe. Because during that period, I was talking about the Colin Baker era, there was a TV show on the BBC where they got, or it was either BBC or ITV, but on a British channel, where they got Doctor Who fans on to confront the writers and say what they thought about the show. And one of the teenagers they got on was a guy called Chris Chibnall. And he actually criticised the writers to their face and said, well, I think what you're doing with Doctor Who is terrible. It's a disgrace, and rah, rah, rah. And Chris Chibnall is now the current head writer and producer of Doctor Who, facing a very similar situation to what
probably cringing at that video exists.
Yeah. So there's a bit of irony and poetic justice to that, I think.
You know, it's a shame because when this current lull in the show's success happened, it was also happened to be during the period when we got the first female Doctor, the first non-white Doctor, the first non-white Master, the first Doctor companion potential romance that was not heterosexual. It's unfortunate that all of those things happened during an era where it dropped in ratings because people are blaming that. People are using it as a reason to condemn woke culture. They're blaming the fact that the audiences don't want a woman doctor. They want a straight white man. They don't want a black doctor. They want a straight white man. The Master shouldn't be non-white. They need a straight white man. And it's unfortunate because I think it's great that the show took all of these leaps, broke all these ceilings. In fact, the very first Jodie Whittaker thing is actually a video of a glass ceiling breaking and her going, oops. And I thought that was a great teaser for her introduction. But it's a shame that these extraordinary achievements in terms of progressing the show forward are the very things that those who are not progressive are blaming for the lull. And I'm hoping that over time that will go away, especially because they didn't take the easy route and make the next Doctor a straight white male Doctor. So I'm hoping that Gatwa will be the reinforcement they need to prove, okay, bigots, shut up. That's kind of what I'm hoping.
Yeah. And, you know, Ncuti Gatwa is a great actor as well, you know.
He's great on Sex Education. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is amusing, by the way, the Doctor does seem to, it goes like this a little bit. The Doctor seems to get younger as time goes on, except for Capaldi, where he did this again. But for the most part, if you look at William Hartnell and Ncuti Gatwa, it's a bit of a difference in age, and it's been gradual. Like they've, you know, perceptively gotten younger. And I say perceptively because it's not really true. The actors are actually closer in age than some people realize, partly because Hartnell looked older than he was, for example. So perceptively, the Doctor goes from being old man to little boy. And that's not really the case. But it is amusing because he's a person who lives for thousands of years.
And they kind of play with that in the story. Like they said, I can't remember whether this was in an episode or whether it was in a novel or something. But there's one story where the Doctor's talking about how, like, when I was younger, I used to act all older, like you do when you're young, you know. And I really enjoy that. And there's an episode where the 12th Doctor, played by Peter Capaldi, meets the first Doctor, who was originally played by William Hartnell, but they got another actor to play him because, of course, William Hartnell's not with us anymore. And the first Doctor's like seeing Peter Capaldi, his future self, and he says, well, I always imagined I'd get younger. And the 12th Doctor's outraged. It's like, I am younger.
I am younger. Which is funny because the thing was, people perceived William Hartnell as being an old man. William Hartnell is about the age I am right now. But William Hartnell look substantially older than I look. And so they played with the idea that Peter Capaldi, who is wonderful, but he looks closer to his age. And so people are, they play with the idea that William Hartnell is somehow younger than Peter Capaldi. As older than, I'm saying this backwards. You know what I'm trying to say? The fact that that Capaldi is just kind of like flummoxed by the idea. Well, I am, younger. But the truth is that he's around the same age that Hartnell was. I don't know their exact ages, but I know that they're pretty close.
Yeah, I think Hartnell was 55 when he got the role, but he looks significantly older.
Yeah, I'm 54, and I do not look the same age that Hartnell looked. I mean, Hartnell looked like an old man, but we found out later it's because he was a sick person, unfortunately.
Yeah. I just figured it was because modern medicine makes you look younger, Rich.
That's what it is. Or I'm a Time Lord. I may be the next incarnation after Shooty Dallas. Paul, earlier on you mentioned Ian, and one of the things that I found so fun about the character of Ian back during the Hartnell years was the banter between the Doctor and Ian. It was largely because William Hartnell, and this is, like in hindsight, I bet the writers felt bad about this, but William Hartnell tended to forget his lines a lot, and he would flub them. And this was a time when it's a lot like watching Dark Shadows. If there's a flub, it basically stayed on the show because there wasn't a lot of money to refilm things. And so that William Hartnell, when addressing Ian, would get his name wrong. And so instead of saying Chesterton, he'd say Chesterfield, and then correct himself. And so the writers started having fun with this. And then one point, Ian snaps at him and says, what his real name is. And in hindsight, I bet that when Hartnell's illness came forth, they probably felt bad about this. But it does make for some really charming scenes between Hartnell's Doctor and Ian, and Ian constantly getting frustrated at the Doctor's inability to say his name right, which unfortunately was, due to the beginnings of Alzheimer's. But
that sucks.
Yeah, it was Alzheimer's, right? Am I saying that correctly?
I don't think it was Alzheimer's.
Maybe dementia.
No, it was.
As I said that, I'm like, I don't think I'm right about that.
No, he had a problem with his heart. I can't remember exactly what the condition was, but
I knew as I was saying that, I'm like, I don't think I'm right. Okay,
yeah. But no, it wasn't Alzheimer's. It was a thing with his heart, unfortunately.
But whatever it was, it created memory problems for him.
Yeah. So tell me, to wrap up, tell me one thing. Finish this sentence for me. You should watch Doctor Who if blank. And then tell me what you're most looking forward to for the next season. Paul.
You should watch Doctor Who if you want a show with like limitless potential, because you can tell any story with Doctor Who, because it is literally about a person who can go anywhere. And also it has the greatest theme tune of all time as well. So if you want a show that has limitless potential and the best theme tune ever, then Doctor Who is for you.
I'm going to build on what Paul said, and you should watch Doctor Who if you are a member of the human species. Because there is not a genre or story type that hasn't been covered at some point. So whether you're into science fiction or fantasy, or really dark stories, or really comedic stories, or romance, or just day in the life type stories, or period pieces, or really futuristic pieces, it doesn't matter, because it's all going to be in there. So if you are somebody who actually enjoys something, Doctor Who is for you.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys. This was awesome for educating me about Doctor Who. And
next week, I need to hear what you think of the first 6 Doctors. I need you to have caught up by then. That's only like what 600-700 episodes. You can do it.
On it, Rich. I still owe you an essay, but okay.
I forgive you.
Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Click like, share, and subscribe, please. And we will meet you again next time. Thank you for everyone in the chat. Aaron, Monica, Lamar, JD. We see you, we hear you. And yeah, thanks guys. Have fun watching the finale later.
Yes.